Since the end of the season, no Auburn football player's stock has gone up more than Payton Thorne's.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Joining me as he does every single Monday, it is the Lindsay Crosby of AuburnDaily.com and a bunch of other places. And Lindsay, you and I, we put our heads together. We made a list of the 5 Auburn players whose stock has gone up the most since the season ended. And let's start with the number 1 player on that list. And it is Payton Thorne. I already hear the boos, already feel the eye rolls from several Auburn folks that watch this show, Lindsay, because the Auburn fan base is split on this. But no player has had their stock rise more since the end of the season than Auburn quarterback Payton Thorne. I mean, let's think about how the offseason started for Auburn. It was Hugh Freeze kind of addressing the question of, is there going to be a quarterback competition? He says yes. Now, obviously, it seems like there isn't a quarterback competition. And then, obviously, they added so many weapons for him to throw to. Sounds like he was solid throughout spring practice. Payton Thorne's stock continues to shoot up. Regardless of if he gets better or not, the situation is going to allow him to be way better than he was a year ago.
Yeah, the big takeaway for me on Payton Thorne is Auburn has shown somewhat last year, but especially this year in the portal, that for the most part, they can go get a player they want, right?
Sure.
Like you hit on most of your big targets this year. You did the best out of anybody when it comes to offensive line last year, a lot of other things. The thing that you never really heard a lot about this spring was Auburn being heavily in on quarterbacks. And if Payton Thorne was not taking the steps he needed to take in spring, throwing to some of these new guys like a Cam Coleman, guys like that, if he did not have the growth, did not have the comfort in the scheme, performance on the field, I think you would have heard more about, hey, Auburn's looking for a quarterback in spring. Look what happened last spring. You had guys on campus, and then what happens? Auburn turns around and goes and gets Payton Thorne in the post-spring window. So
right.
I feel good about the fact that they're obviously comfortable with him. They've really even kind of shut down a lot of the talk about, is there a quarterback battle? Like they have made it clear in everything but an official depth chart that this is Payton Thorne's job entering fall camp. And if you were genuinely either trying to give a message to him that he was not good enough, or you felt like he was not your guy, you wouldn't be doing that. You would either be going to bring in somebody else for competition, or you would be doing everything you could to tell the story about there being an open quarterback competition. Instead, Payton Thorne's the guy, to the point where I wouldn't be surprised if he was your pick for SEC Media Days.
Yeah, I'd actually be surprised if he wasn't one of the players representing Auburn at SEC Media Days later this summer. I'm with you on that. And then, we talk about the personnel, adding talented wide receivers like Robert Lewis in the December window and Sam Jackson. We'll see how much of a factor he is. And then Keandre Lambert-Smith over the last few weeks. Obviously, that was a big national headline when Auburn was able to get him out of the transfer portal, the former Penn State wide receiver. The options to throw to, Cam Coleman, who we'll talk about. Spoiler, he's on this list as well. But, I mean, there's just so many different aspects of this offense. It's like, oh, there's actually guys you have to respect and pay attention to. But then let's zoom out a little bit and you look at the other pieces, right? With Hugh Freeze being more involved in the offense. I think it was almost addition by subtraction just when they moved on from, members of the previous coaching staff. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, you hear time and time again how impressive Ken Austin is at coaching quarterbacks and the offensive mind that he has. It's just everything around Auburn's quarterback position, whether it's Payton Thorne, whether it's Hank Brown or Walker White or Holden Gerner, it doesn't matter who it is. In this case, it is Payton Thorne. He's going to be the starter unless something really, really unfortunate happens to him.
Yeah.
Everything about it has gotten better. And once again, this is not me saying that Payton Thorne's stock is the highest of everyone on the team. It has increased the most since the end of the season. And hats off to Hugh Freeze. Because, look, the great programs figure out how to win without elite quarterback play. I mean, we've seen Georgia win titles with that. We've seen Alabama win titles with that. I mean, I think Michigan did it with that this past year. You know, jury's still out, and we'll see what JJ McCarthy can do at the next level. But just all in all, these great programs make it as easy as possible for your quarterback to play solid football. And Auburn took a step in that direction this offseason, and Payton Thorne gets the benefit from that.
Yeah, I'm not going to say this is the most talented roster he's been on. It's definitely, I think, better than that 2022 season where his numbers took a dip, right? And
his second year at Michigan State.
His second full year.
Yeah. Second year starter.
Year.
Right.
Yeah, because he did get 4 games this freshman season. He threw for like 500 yards. But I mean, it when you look at what he did last year, and then you turn around and you extrapolate a lot of that stuff out to how do you think that game would go or that series would go or whatever with the new personnel this year? In just about every situation, the running game theoretically slightly better because your running backs, it's the same people, but they're more skilled. But your offensive line should be blocking better. Your receiver should be running better routes. Your tight ends they have one more year of experience because you have Ronald Fairweather coming back.
Sure.
In every regard, when you look at why plays broke down, if there was a non-Payton Thorne reason the play broke down, that area has been addressed in the offseason. And so it makes sense that he's in one of the most improved situations from year to year. And I think now your goal is, can you get him back to some of those Michigan State levels of production in his final year of eligibility? Completion percentage is the same, right? 61.1% last year. He averaged 61.0% at Michigan State over those 2 years. It's the same, but yards per attempt, total yardage, total attempts is all higher at Michigan State. Can you get him to that level in his final year? I think you set up a situation where you could. The question is now, does it happen or not?
Yeah, I think so. I think he'll stay around 60% completion percentage. I think those numbers will get a little bit higher. Mm-hmm. And if that happens, you know, I think Auburn can add a win or 2 or maybe 3 from last year to this upcoming season. It's just, he's got to do it. He needed help his first year as a starter at Michigan State. That's kind of been who he has been as a quarterback. And so what did Auburn do? They said, okay, instead of investing a bunch of NIL money in a position where there's already some NIL money invested, let's go help the rest of the roster, not only for this upcoming season, but for the future of the program. And that's what they did. And I think it makes sense. And we'll certainly see what happens with that. So do you agree? Let us know in the comments down below. Is Payton Thorne the Auburn Tiger whose stock has risen the most since the end of the season? Or is it somebody else on our list? We'll jump into that in just a moment. Right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is the best place to find qualified candidates for your company quickly and for free. That's why you've got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. They've got the tools to help professionals find your team as quick and effectively as possible. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses, they get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Over 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. You should too, because odds are, if you're not, your competition is. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Lindsay, as we keep on trucking through our 5 players whose stock has gone up the most since the end of Auburn football season, number 2 on our list is Auburn corner Kayin Lee. I think Kayin Lee is number 2 on this for several reasons. 1, off-field implications. Everything we saw and heard in spring practice was Kayin Lee is living up to the hype. Was told by several folks he's Auburn's best corner, and that is with Keontae Scott moving back to outside corner. Because I think Keontae Scott moving back to outside corner had opened the possibility of some position battles happening at the corner spot opposite of him. The fact that those conversations dwindled and the conversation was quickly, okay, who's the third corner on this team, I think makes you feel good about how Kayin Lee performed. And then also, there's the off-the-field aspect of this. And that is the fact that they didn't add any other corners. And it does sound like Auburn was looking at other corners, but Kayin Lee is still solidly in that same spot. And then they went out and add pass rushers. They went out and added pass rushers, whether it was your interior defensive linemen, and we'll talk more about them with other positions in a moment, but specifically adding Kieron Crawford, the edge defender, the buck linebacker from Arkansas State. Auburn needed another pass rusher. And the fact that they added a guy who I think has NFL type potential, Lindsay, that helps the corners a ton. They're going to be in coverage for a little bit less every single play. And I think over the course of the season, guys like Kayin Lee are really going to benefit from that. So we've got Kayin Lee at number 2.
Yeah, to help with that pass rusher comment for a minute, like everybody needs to understand, given enough time, any wide receiver will get open. Like you will eventually get open. And the goal behind getting a pass rush is they can get to the quarterback and disrupt that pass play before the cornerback finally loses coverage. Now, Kayin Lee's sticky as heck, right? He will stay on that defender or that receiver for a long time. It's going to eventually happen. And what I like is when you watch him, it feels like he's particularly strong at disrupting the play early. And so I think that he and those pass rushers are going to help each other, right? Because if you've schemed up, if you're an offensive coordinator and you're like, I don't want to let this pass rush beat me because they've added a lot of guys, they got a lot of talent here, and I want to run some sort of quick hitting play to a wide receiver, Kayin Lee's not going to let you do that. He's going to get into that play early and disrupt that play. So they kind of feed off of each other. And the big thing to me is, for some reason in football, and nobody's ever answered this for me, cornerbacks don't rotate like wide receivers do. They stay in the game almost the entire game. Later in the contest, Auburn has much better depth. And as you're rotating in different pass rushers, you're still going to be able to have a pass rusher that is good enough to beat the opposing blocker when you have a tired cornerback who's played 65 snaps today against a wide receiver who's played 25 or 30. That to me is the big change. Is third quarter, fourth quarter, Kayin Lee is still going to be able to be effective because he may lose a half second of coverage on that total clock, but your pass rushers are now deeper and better, and they're going to be able to continue pressuring the quarterback late in games. And that was something, without getting all these pass rushers, I don't think you could have said entering spring camp. Yeah.
I think Kayin Lee's going to be a stud, obviously, and I think his stock continues to go up. And this time next year, I think we're talking about him as a potential NFL draft pick. So
a defensive back going to pro out of Auburn.
What?
It's almost like we are kind of DBU. Weird.
I think we're getting there, man. I think we're getting there. No question about it, because Crawford is next, and he's Kite might be there too. We'll see. All right, so yeah, we've got Payton Thorne at 1, and then Kayin Lee at 2. Number 3 on our list of Auburn Tigers whose stock has risen the most since the end of the season. We've got the Cam Coleman, and I almost didn't put him on this list because like the expectation and the stock was already so high. Like he already came in to the program with his stock, as high as it could possibly be. But then somehow he was better. And, I got criticized for gassing the kid up a little too much. It was like, no, guys, I don't think y'all realize how good he is. And then you go see him in person. And it's like, oh my goodness. And I don't think people fully got what the media was saying because, we got to see him in these little bits of time. And, I think fans are just like, okay, yeah, whatever. Then A-Day happens. And it's like, oh, that is different. That is a different type player that Auburn has ever had at wide receiver. So that's why he's at 3. That's not why he's at 1, just because the stock was already so high, but it did get elevated even more.
I don't think people realize that, one, Zach has his pulse on Auburn football, and you guys are crazy for ever doubting him. He rarely misses this stuff. But 2, like you said, I don't really think people realize how good Cam Coleman is. And I would be confident in saying Cam Coleman right now, from a pure talent perspective, maybe one of the most talented wide receivers Auburn has ever had on campus, and he's not played in a game yet.
Yeah.
Like just from a sheer athleticism, skill, talent perspective, the kid is an absolute freak. It is,
barring anything crazy happening, he will finish his career as Auburn's best receiver ever. And the fun and crazy thing is Perry Thompson's probably going to finish top 5 as well. I mean, we're about to see something that we haven't seen at Auburn ever, Lindsay, ever. Now, will that come to fruition this season? I'm not sure. Will it come to fruition in 2025? Yes. So this upcoming season is going to be the appetizer. And then I think what happens next year on offense is going to be scary and a lot of fun. But yeah, Cam Coleman, we got Cam Coleman at number 3 as far as players that have whose stock has risen the most since the end of the season.
Can you imagine being one of these quarterbacks at Auburn and just knowing that, like, hey, Payton Thorne is out of eligibility after this year. Someone's going to get to throw to these guys, and it could be me. Like, can you, like, it's like winning the football lottery almost.
Well, I mean, look at the situation Auburn's in that regard. With Hank Brown and Walker White, obviously, I think the fan base feels good about both of those options moving forward. And then it seems like Auburn is in the thick of it for Juju Lewis, the top quarterback in this upcoming class, which has to be part of the sales pitch. It's like, look, you'll be taken care of, but also look who you'll be throwing to. Who you'll be throwing to. And sure, schools like USC, which is where he's committed now, they can offer similar things. But if I'm Juju Lewis, I'm talking to Cam Coleman every single day and go ahead and getting that chemistry down as much as you possibly can. Perry Thompson as well. Bryce Kane, Malcolm Simmons. I mean, the future of this offense is very, very bright. And that's going to be part of the sales pitch, Lindsay. There's no question about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's wide receivers like this can take an okay quarterback, a marginal quarterback, a slightly above average college quarterback, and can push them into a late round NFL draft slot, just simply based on how much they can bail you out if you can get the ball anywhere close to them. I remember watching Calvin Johnson in college, and it just looked different, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it was a complete freak of nature kind of thing. I remember watching some of those Ole Miss receivers under Hugh Freeze. It's history repeating itself, and my prediction in that exact same situation. And for as good as you thought he was better. We saw it at A-Day. It was absurd. Be very excited about Cam Coleman and really that entire group of receivers, but he's the one we've seen the most of, and he's the one who is the poster child for all of this and probably will be his entire time on campus. Yeah, all right, so our top 3 right now, Payton Thorne, Kayin Lee, then Cam Coleman as our top 3 players who has seen their stock go up the most since the end of the Auburn football season. The last 2, both defensive players. And it's really not even about them. It's about what's happening around them. And we'll discuss that in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel's America's #1 sportsbook. It's winner take all time in the NBA, in the NHL. And FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. And obviously, there's stuff even farther down the line. Some of these lines that we've talked about on the show, where Auburn, I think, is being a little disrespected with some of the lines that are already out there. Go ahead and get in on the action at FanDuel. Somebody kind of called me out and say, hey, some people complain about the lines. Other people go ahead and bet on them and capitalize. You should do the same. Oklahoma, with Auburn being a 3-point dog there, a 10-point dog at Missouri. I'm looking at it. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel's America's #1 sportsbook. Lindsay, the 4th player of all the Auburn Tigers to have their stock move up and down towards the end of the season, or since the end of the season, we've got Buck linebacker Jalen McLeod. It seems like a gear has flipped, not only with his mentality, but what we've seen on the field. 35 is going to be a problem. 35 is going to be a problem for opposing offenses. They're going to have to double him. He's still going to consistently win in those types of matchups. And I just think the step that he's had, since he's really been here, the issue has been his health. And man, if he can stay healthy, Lindsay, if he can stay healthy,
Jalen McLeod can be, I don't think he's going to be a double-digit sack guy, but as far as impact, and what he does is impacting the other players around him, Jalen McLeod continues to trend up in my mind.
I mean, he was second on the team with like 50 tackles last year. I think he had 5.5 sacks, and he didn't dress for UMass. So like he didn't even play really the full season. We saw when everything goes right, when he's fully healthy, when he gets a good night's rest, a good week of study and everything. In the Arkansas game, we saw what he can do. Yeah. He can take over a game. I think he had like 8 or 9 tackles. He had 3 sacks. He forced a fumble. I want to say he won like Defensive Player of the Week for that. And that's a thing that I feel like is going to happen more often. I think I'm right with you. Not going to be double-digit sacks, but I think you're going to look up late in the season and we're going to be asking, is he going to get there? Because he's 8.5, 9 sacks entering the final week of play, plus a bowl game. It just feels like same thing here as with the cornerbacks. More consistency in front of him. More consistency coverage behind him means he's going to be able to, provided he's healthy, and that's the big caveat here. He's going to be able to be more consistent week, day in, day out. And then the other thing, I mentioned this earlier too with the pass rushers, because you have more depth, you can rotate him more and keep him fresh, keep him from getting overused so that he is still effective late in games. It's going to be a big year for Jalen McLeod. I think the only reason he wasn't higher when I gave you my list and we collaborated on this was because as a defensive player, somebody who doesn't have the ball in his hands every day, it's harder to have as big of an impact as we would want. Yeah. But I think as big of an impact as you can have as a pass rusher, he's in for that. His stock is way up based on where it was last year.
Yeah, adding Kieran Crawford as that number 2 pass rusher, I think, is going to be huge. It's going to be fun to see how much do they rotate him out, how much do they have both those guys on the field at the same time, whatever that may look like. I think that's going to be something that benefits Jalen McLeod's stock moving forward. And I also think, now he's really viewed as a legitimate NFL draft pick. I don't know if he really was as soon as the season ended. So I think he took a big step forward so far this offseason as far as his stock. And then our final player, number 5 on our list, Eugene Asante. And kind of for similar reasons. This is a guy that, I was a little concerned about Auburn's linebacker room, not because of them, but because of what's in front of them. And Brian Smith talks about this a lot when he comes on the show. But now when you look at the defensive line that's in front of them, there's going to be a lot less free blockers coming and trying to, get all up on Eugene Asante as well as the other linebackers. So I think the addition of Phillip Bleedy, Gage Keys, Trill Carter, Isaiah Rakes, all of those guys coming in since the end of the season is going to benefit Eugene Asante tremendously. Also, what else has happened since the end of the season? Oh, they hired DJ Durkin. And I mean, just kind of a natural, stock boost to stay on theme for every linebacker in that room. So Eugene Asante, Mr. Let's Work himself, I think he definitely deserves to be in the top 5 in this list.
Yeah, something to me that kind of stood out is you have Eugene Asante and Austin Keys, and then behind them, you were a little unsettled as to were something to happen to Austin Keys, who is the running mate for Eugene Asante. So all the reasons you mentioned, but then also bringing in Dorian Mausi means that I'm going to call him the number 2 linebacker. We don't use that terminology, but I'm just number 2 linebacker next to Asante. You have a higher floor for whoever is in that spot. Because even if you have an injury or you rotate guys in, you feel good about whether it's Woodyard coming in, Mausi, whoever it is. It makes it harder. All of the additions of the pass rushers, the additions of linebackers in that room with him, all makes it more difficult for any opposing offensive line to key on him on a run play to stop him and to scheme something on offense to attack him specifically, because you have so many other guys you have to now pay attention to and worry about. And it's offensive coordinators are not going to have a fun time trying to figure out how to attack this offense. And you touched on it, but adding in DJ Durkin, I don't think people realize the man's legacy with linebackers. He is to linebackers what I guess the Zach Blackerby touch is to defensive backs. Like he can take these guys and turn them into NFL caliber linebackers, similar to how when you identify and talk about a defensive back and the dude's stock explodes.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
so
they get drafted. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. It's the Zach Blackerby touch. And so
You're
I'm
welcome,
excited to
DJ
see.
James. You're welcome.
If you'd send some of those, baked beans, that'd be nice. You have a can. I know you have a can. But like it would
Somewhere.
I'm really excited. I think it's on that bookshelf to your left.
Yeah, I see it. I found it.
I would be really excited to see the difference in the scouting reports, the draft reports for Eugene Asante now versus the end of the year when he has a year in the scheme with better support in front of him and next to him, and then really behind him as well because you move Keontae Scott back to the outside and things like that.
Yeah. And then just an honorable mention, and I put this question up on social media asking, you guys, hey, who do you think is an Auburn player whose stock has risen the most since the end of the season? Several folks said Keldrick Falk, which surprises me a little bit. That's the guy that we want. I mean, I think it's probably best for Auburn outside of quarterback for Keldrick Falk stock to go up the most over the course of the offseason. I still just haven't heard much about him. That doesn't mean anything. I've specifically asked about him to folks within the program, and it's, nothing crazy. It's like, yeah, he's really good. We're still working on him,
He's great.
Okay, great. So I don't know. I didn't put him in the top 5, but if I could do 2 or 3 more, if we did a top 7 or a top 8, he'd probably make it. So that was one that I saw. And then a few people said Keandre Lambert-Smith, who obviously got here like 2 weeks ago. And so I don't know if that really makes sense for this list, but
no,
obviously he'll be a big, a large addition. So
one of the
wanted
names
to highlight those two. Yeah.
That I saw some folks kind of bandy about, Connor Liu, as far as
Makes
you saw
sense.
what he's able to do just last year on sheer talent and athleticism. Give him a full year in this offense, building the chemistry with the linemen next to him, Jeremiah Wright, Dylan Wade, and just seeing what he's going to be able to do this year now that he's acclimated to SEC football.
Yeah.
And kind of understands what's happening because he did all of this last year at 19 years old.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sure.
very young. And you give him time in the weight room, you give him time, physical development, mental development, confidence. It could be a ridiculous season for Connor Liu. He may, before he leaves Auburn, I think, to go pro, just to clarify, I think he's going to end up being a Remington Award candidate simply because he's probably the best center we've had at Auburn in a while.
Yeah, and he'll also, I think a big part of awards like the Remington, which goes to the best center in college football, I think that's almost like a career award. And for him to be able to say like he'll have 2.5 years, essentially by the time it's all done, 2.5 years of like starting experience, I think that'll help him. I think that'll help him for sure. If I would have done top 6, my 6th player would have been Xavier Miller, just to stay with the theme of offensive line. He looks like a different player to me. And I think he's going to be potentially NFL good when it's all said and done. So the fact that there's multiple other arguments that we can make, shows that how good of an offseason Auburn has had so far. So Lindsay, our top 5 Auburn players whose stock has risen the most since the end of the season: Payton Thorne, Kayan Lee, Cam Coleman, Jalen McLeod, and Eugene Asante. There's our top 5. What's yours? Drop it in the comments down below. Hit us up in the Discord or on social media. Lindsay, how can people check out everything you've got going on?
I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. It's kind of the hub for everything there. Braves coverage, bravestoday.com. Auburn Tigers coverage, auburndaily.com. Come read it.
Yep. Please like the video. Please subscribe. Programming note, I'll be in Utah this week. Nothing should be affected, but just letting you guys know. Like the video, subscribe. We'll see you tomorrow. This has been Locked On Auburn.